episode on Let's Talk Wellness with Shal. My name is Shalini. I'm a corporate tech professional, a yoga and meditation instructor, and an integrative nutritionist health coach. And the topic for today is prioritizing mental health, the athlete's journey. Tune in to Let's Talk Wellness with Shal on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify to listen to the full episode. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Tara Wells. Tara Wells is a licensed sports social worker based in South Florida, dedicated to empowering athletes to cultivate a strong sense of identity and confidence. With a trauma-informed and mindfulness-based approach, including meditation, she supports athletes in overcoming mental health challenges and navigating system barriers. As the former host of the Let's Be Real podcast, focused on mental health and systemic inequalities, Tara continues her advocacy through her work with elite individual athletes and teams. She aims to create inclusive spaces and is dedicated to focusing on QTBIPOC athletes in the future. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. And I know you're in Florida, so it must be nice and sunny.
Can't complain. Can't complain. Living in paradise is a nice way to be. Nice way to start
Yes.
a Wednesday morning.
I know. I remember December is like the perfect time because we had, taken our girls multiple times, right? Of course, you know why we would come to Florida. And so there's all the adventure parks and everything. Anyway, so I remember December is actually the perfect time.
It's so nice. And we've gotten a couple of waves of cold fronts, which is even better. Right now it's very mild. The sun is hot, which is what I live for. So again, I won't complain.
Great. All right, so we'll get started. So can you share a little bit about your journey and how you got to, a sport social worker? What inspired you and even focusing on athletes?
Definitely. I think the shortest way to define my story, and I'll get into the longer version too, the shortest way to describe my story is me being the person that I needed when I was an adolescent or even a pre-adolescent. So I'm, in a sense, kind of addressing that gap that I noticed, and that gap hasn't gone anywhere, not just for my individual journey, but so many young people and young minds, specifically athletes, that respond well to that kind of attention, I'll say, to our mental wellness and our mental health. That's not a new thing in terms of what our body and minds do. It's a new thing in terms of how we talk about it and how we destigmatize it and how we lean into each other, right? So my journey starts, I am not the accomplished athlete as many of my clients are. I hung up my athlete hat. Let me not say that. I'm a lifelong athlete, but in terms of competition and taking myself way too seriously, I hung that up a while ago. But I started in tennis and lacrosse were my main sports growing up, and loved it. Loved team sports, love individual sports. Like tennis, I'm not a great doubles player, so if anyone wants to partner up with me, I'm not the one. I found myself, if I can get pretty transparent, I found myself in quite a low when I was about 12, 13 years old, feeling very isolated, feeling very alone, yet surrounded by people. I was in a very busy area of Texas growing up. I was surrounded by friends, hobbies, teammates, new interests, new hobbies, finding so many things to fill that gap of isolation. Now with my grown-up brain knowing that that was depression, among other things that I was dealing with, and just not having that outlet, not having that person, not having that trusted system of coping skills. So the long story is I want to prevent where my mind went. My mind went to some pretty dark places. Luckily, I'm still here. Everything is fine now, but I have my resources. I have things that got me here. So I kind of took that mentality into my college studies. When I went to university, I was not a college athlete, but I was working with our athletics department. I went to a massive state school, huge football team, huge sports culture there, which is something I wanted. Like I said, I grew up in Texas. Friday Night Lights was like my first religion. So going to a massive state school, being a part of the athletics culture there as a peer and employee was amazing. I really got to see behind the curtain. I was an RA, I was a resident advisor, so I had residents who I was a peer with, and I was also counseling them. I was also supporting them through roommate conflicts. I was supporting them through going to their first therapy appointment ever and navigating the system of a big school. And a lot of lot of my residents, a lot of my peers were coming from towns that were smaller than a small college town. So kind of making that world a little bit more attainable. And then eventually I took those skills the into my working world. So mental health wasn't a thing in college athletics when I graduated in 2014. It was tutoring, maybe strategies tutoring, and there might have been a contracted psychiatrist with an athletics department. But contracted is in they're working part-time. You might see them once a month. It was bare bones. So now we've made huge strides. We're still on the path to making things more accessible and still destigmatizing, still doing all of that groundwork. But we've made a big, big wave in that. And now I work completely independently. I have my own practice here in South Florida that I actually can span across the country because it's therapy, but it's also mental skills, which I can cross state lines with. So that's the longer version of me being the person that I needed and seeing that that is still a gap that is very much prevalent today.
Wow. So what was that, I would say, your first step, when you decided to get help? Or I'm just curious, I mean, how did that even begin or where did that even begin?
Admittedly, I found that step much later than I think I should have or deserved to. I won't say I don't like the word should, but it came to me in college, actually. I was going through an identity, not a crisis, identity exploration that I was due to have experienced years before. But for whatever reason, situation, circumstances, college had let me into this place where I'm really asking myself who I am. What do I want out of this thing called life? College is a really good opportunity to ask about your purpose and what are you setting yourself up to do? And that became very chaotic in my mind. So that was actually when I went to my first therapy session, was when I was in college. That was my first outreach for help. And I want my community, I want my people, I want to know what these resources are. And it was evidently it lit a fire. So
Got it. Okay. And I know in my introduction I mentioned this too, right? Trauma informed. Can you help the audience understand a little bit more about, what is trauma informed? And again, how did you, kind of go into that path as well?
definitely, definitely. I love this question. And I'll talk in more generalities. It's not specific to the athlete population. I've been trauma informed since I first started getting into counseling before I even got my master's. So, trauma informed is simply an approach that allows me to let my client know more than I do. I think that is the simplest way I could put it is I show up listening to their story, and where my work informs that through the trauma lens is traumas and the events of our lives, even more general than that, inform how we think, how we act, how we react. So, what trauma does is it rewires the brain for us to signal danger when there is no danger, or to try to prevent danger and we're hyper vigilant, we're overly prepared. And that can lead to some maladaptive patterns of behavior. That can lead to things that are overly protective, lead to symptoms that many of your listeners are aware of, like paranoia or like hypervigilance of preparing for everything, worst case thinking, worst case scenario thinking, all or nothing thinking, those types of patterns. With a trauma informed lens, I have the capacity to really dive into, I'm seeing these patterns, let's trace back to where this comes from. And oftentimes there is a relationship or an event or something that has gone on, not necessarily in childhood, but I'm very well versed in childhood trauma. So that's, I guess, I suppose a version of how I can discuss what trauma informed care is. It's story first, it's narrative first, and then I kind of get to peel back from there.
Got it. Yeah, that's really powerful because was reading a research somewhere where, it said at least 70% of us, right, at some point in our life will experience some kind of trauma, right? And so I think it's one of those things. I know it's still a taboo, you don't talk about it, but it's one of those which is good. There's a lot more awareness now and people are actually coming out, right? If they're experiencing something that they actually want to share, right? And they want to
Yes.
talk about. So that's definitely a good thing.
Absolutely. And I'll add on to that too. We've historically only thought of trauma as a combat veteran issue, PTSD and things like that. A lot of our case studies have been based on that. And it's very interesting when you look into the research, and this blew my mind when I first heard about it. combat veterans experience trauma in a way that they are to some degree prepared to experience. Our brains and our bodies do not have the innate capacity to deal with combat. We don't. There is trauma associated with that. It is not a part of our brain's natural existence. But what's the new studies and the newer wave of evaluating PTSD and trauma symptoms comes from things that are not episodic, that are not based on a single combat event. They're based on years of dealing with a narcissistic parent or an emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive spouse or partner. So those things it's very interesting how similar those symptoms can show up with very different manifestations of trauma.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so then I'll get to, I would say more exciting topic for me, but the next question, which is around mindfulness and meditation. So you can, help us understand a little more about, for one, how does that improve, right, or even impact the performance of athletes? And second, how do you integrate that, just in your tool set, right, and in your sessions?
Definitely, definitely. I will start with the word visualization. It's a recent gold standard for sports psychology, for sports social workers. Visualization is an incredibly powerful tool. In essence, you are closing your eyes, placing yourself in a situation in your mind's eye of being successful, of experiencing accomplishment, of reaching podium, whatever that case is. And I create and draft scripts constantly. They're very individualized. I don't like using a one size fits all, especially for visualization, because I don't see one sport. I see dozens of sports in my practice. So visualization being an incredibly powerful tool to plant the idea that something is within reach, that something is within your grasp, and you have felt this before. Visualization is mimicking that feeling. So when it comes time to perform, when it's game time, when it's time to show up, this is a familiar feeling, as opposed to some of our more anxious minds that are quick to doubt or quick to take that perception away. So visualization being a huge tool. I'm also big in the mind body connection, so progressive muscle relaxation where you tense and relax muscle groups. So like raising your shoulders all the way to your earlobes and relaxing it. I usually do that through a whole body scan. Those are my two main tools that I encourage athletes to use. They're wonderful for mind body connection. They are wonderful for promoting wellness and also the belief that you can. Because a lot of my athletes are working on deficit of I can't or I won't. So this promotes the idea that this can happen.
So it's interesting you talk about visualization, right? And I'm just thinking in my head, is that somewhere connected with manifestation? Because I know there's like this whole, buzzword now, right? It's about manifest what you want, right? And then you'll see that kind of come alive, right? So I'm just thinking, is that kind of related then to visualization?
It must be. I can't imagine how it's not. I use the word familiarity. It's you've been here before. You were here in session, so you're going to go do it again, which is essentially what manifestation is about too. And I have a lot of clients that they come to me with their own meditation practices drafted, as mine is always drafted. It's a masterpiece in work in progress. But yeah, manifestation I think is certainly a piece of that.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those buzzwords, just I know this also because just recently, we had a 18-year-old from India who's the world's chess champion now. So I'm not sure if you saw the news, but again, in the news, right, it was taking it back to when he was way younger, probably like 6, 7 years old, where, he was already manifesting this, right? He said, I want to become the world's number one champion, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we can always visualize, but things also need to happen, right? So it's like the universe needs to come together for all of this to happen. But again, what's in our control, right, is we manifest, we visualize, right? We dream to get somewhere. So I totally can see how all of this is important and connected.
Yeah. And thank you for using the word dream. It's like intentional dreaming. It's putting that dream in a direction where you're setting up tasks and it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Awesome. So, the other thing is many athletes tie their identity to their performance. So how do you help, build that sense of self or even confidence beyond that sport?
What a great question. Identity is a huge cornerstone of the work that I do. And there are more and more people I'm becoming connected with as recently as of 2 days ago who are specifically doing identity work with athletes. So even more niche from where I'm at, they are only on the identity piece. Because playing a sport is so ingrained in someone's identity, that can be to their benefit and that can also be to their detriment because it is a hobby, it's an activity, even a profession that has a deadline, it has a time where it ends. Our bodies are not designed to play elite level sports until we take our last breath. It's golf, maybe we have an argument for, but most other sports, certainly not. They're contact, they're high intensity, the training, and our sports are just getting more and more competitive every year, every second. So, identity in the work that I do is reminding my athletes that they are a whole person and being an athlete is a part of that. It may be the biggest part, and that is allowed to take up space, but it is never 100%. You are in our identities, just as people who are athletes or non athletes alike, we are children, we are parents, we are neighbors, we are friends, we are employees at the same time. It's very, very difficult, I might say impossible, to delineate all of those in once. Like in the next 5 seconds, I am only a podcast guest. That's impossible. I am also, dwelling in this home. I'm also a neighbor. I'm also a partner.
Yes, exactly.
So that's strength. That's not limiting. That's not minimizing anything. It's in this moment, me being a podcast guest is my most important identity, which is great. Or me being a sports social worker is my most important identity.
Yeah.
But it is not all that I am. It is not all that I do. And it is not the only thing that defines me. Because I would have some pretty shallow friendships if being a sports social worker is all I was. I add some depth to my conversations, but I'm also, like you meant, I'm a lover of Disney World and theme parks, and that's the richness of what we get to be. It's not limiting. It's what we get to experience and explore.
Awesome. Yeah, and then the other question I had just while I was introducing you, which is I said QT biopic,
Mhm.
right? And so maybe you can help the audience understand what that acronym stands for.
I'd love to, especially as our acronyms just get more and more
Yes,
expansive.
exactly. Yes. I thought I only do that in the corporate world in my tech space, but I assume there's a lot more acronyms there.
They're everywhere. They are everywhere. I need to be mindful and careful with there. But QT BIPOC are queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that is a niche that I absolutely am very, very, very passionate about. I mentioned in college I was exploring my own identity. All of those letters also translate into what was a part of my exploration in terms of my sexuality, my racial identity was the biggest thing I think that I was honing in on in college, which was huge for me and still continues to be a big part of my identity piece now. And then I kind of seek to pour back into that as the conversations get more and more prevalent when it comes to queer and trans athletes too. That's something I'd like to be in the forefront of as we create spaces of equity and equality, as we evaluate what is the reasonable discourse of what we're talking about, because it gets very heated, it gets very political. And I think most, if not all of us, can agree still human beings, still asking for things that we deserve to hear.
Exactly.
And it's not about me having everyone agree or not having everybody on my boat, but it's about understanding what the fears are, what the concerns are, and what the science is as well. I'm very much trying to read as much as I can as it's being published. The plane is being flown and built at the same time.
Exactly. It's all, yeah. So what
Mostly teens and young adults, but I don't have a cap on the upward end. I have athletes that are playing well into their 50s and 60s that I'm seeing right now, and the youngest, because I'm a fully virtual practice, I think my youngest athlete right now is 11. But that was a special exception because the parent was like, they do great in front of a screen, you won't have a problem. And they were right. They're very tuned in. I don't have to worry about like bringing them back in or trying to do anything other than the mindfulness and visualization piece because I do pretty much just talk therapy and processing in that way. But mostly, to your question, mostly teens and young adults.
So, as we conclude, right, what, tips or strategies would you want to leave the audience with, right? Even in terms of how do they get started or any self-care?
Self-care, my first piece is always going to be find your people, find your person, your people, create social support. We are social creatures. Even introverts are social creatures. If anyone's rolling their eyes at me and like, well, I'm an introvert, I like my time with my book. You sure do. And you also like your 5 minutes where you can recharge with a good friend who is good for conversation or pours back into your cup. One of my favorite professors of all time, and he was actually fortunate enough to be one of my professors before he passed, is Dr. Chris Peterson. And he has a very famous quote that I say anytime I can. I have it tattooed on my body. It's other people matter, period. So filling your cup with people that support you, that are there for you. Be very critical, be selective. It's a fun lesson to talk to teenagers about because adults, we're all like nodding our heads, like, yep, the smaller my group got, the richer it was. Teens have a longer road to go with that because social skills are everything. But that's my go-to is find your support. It doesn't have to be in person. It can be distance. We have so much technology, take advantage of it. And then getting started, if I have any athletes listening, it's same thing with the social support. Practice some form of tuning into your body. What is your body or what are your mind asking for you every day? That can be before you go to bed. That can be while you're eating a very standardized meal for you. Whatever your routine can make room for, give yourself anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes of daily meditation and just critical thinking of what your signs are giving you. Because we all have different ways that we manifest those, right? If my stomach is churning, it's not just food I'm asking for. There's something else going on there. If I'm really tired, it's not just sleep. Sleep may be the number one answer, but what else am I needing to restore?
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that because, you also said initially, right, about the whole social skill part of it because I feel that's so important, right? I have two girls myself, right? And my second one's a teenager, the older one's an adult now, but still, right? I feel like the whole company and people you surround yourself with is what you become. There's a saying, right? So I feel like, so it's so important to think about, right, who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yes.
But whether you're introvert or an extrovert, you still need people, right? To your point. So I think, yeah, they're so important. And then, of course, on the meditation and the mindfulness piece, right? I would say that's definitely very close to my heart, but I almost feel like, a daily practice, like literally brushing your teeth, right? At least that's how I love to start my day. But just keeping those 10 minutes or 15 or whatever that is, right, in your routine to just meditate or just go inwards or breath work or something, right? I think makes a huge difference.
I agree. And listeners of your podcast know this, that meditation is not sitting cross-legged and your goal is to be void of thought. That is not the purpose. It can be somebody's practice. It does not have to be your practice. That was very intimidating to me when I first learned
Exactly.
the famous concept. So it's finding an activity, to your point, that is already in your routine and Google the word mindful and the name of that activity. Mindful eating, mindful walking, mindfully
Yes.
petting my pet. Like, great. All of it counts.
Exactly. Yep. When you're just fully present, right, in the moment, I think, which is difficult to do because I feel like we're also wired to multitask, and that's like the cool buzzword. But I also feel, we're slowly kind of drifting away from just doing one thing at a time and doing it well and being present. So
Yes.
I think it's so important for people to just realize, right, each time and just kind of step back and just think a little bit about it. So
So well said. Absolutely.
awesome. Thank you so much, Tara. Before we conclude, I would love for you to share where the audience can find you, reach out to you.
Absolutely. Yes. I have my website, finishlinemindset.com. That's the name of my practice. That is also my handle for Instagram and TikTok. Please follow, DM, reach out to me. You can find my contact information on any of those. And also, I recently just published a couple of digital workbooks on Etsy. So the same shop name, Finish Line Mindset. And if anyone is interested in kind of getting into some lower cost ways of exploring identity or mindfulness as an athlete, those can be really, really great tools as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate this time. I definitely learned a ton and it was awesome talking to an athlete. And actually, you're the first on this podcast. So I really appreciate you joining. And from sunny Florida, well, you stay warm while here we layer up in jackets.
Absolutely. Layer up. I'm about to go hit the cold for the holidays for New Year's next week. I like to vacation to the cold.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.